I guess I can start. My name is Jude. I am a MD PhD student. I'm in my first year of PhD. I'm in the Department of Pharmacology and Cancer Biology. I'm in Chris Wood's lab, and we study cancer basically, and we use CRISPR screening to target vulnerabilities in cancer. And it's been a kind of an interest of ours. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
My name is Bradley Barth. I am a sixth-year PhD student in biomedical engineering, and I work in the Grill Lab, where we use both computational and animal models to study different applications of neural engineering to apply electrical stimulation to the body to relieve different disorders and conditions.
I'm Allie. I'm a second-year PhD student in evolutionary anthropology. And to put it briefly, I study lemur brains and how they relate to other mammals, and also how different hormone receptors within the brains relate to social behavior that we see in lemurs.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm a third-year graduate student in Mark Rauscher's lab. I study questions about evolution and ecology. In particular, I work with the species of plant called morning glories to look at what happens when two species come together, what things maybe get maintained and what things are sort of lost. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you all so much. And just I'll give a brief introduction to, my name is Katie. I'm the graduate student leader for Muser. I'm also a biology PhD student, first year, and who knows what I'll be studying really. I'm still figuring it out, but something to do. I'm in Steve Nowicki's lab, so something to do with animal communication, sexual selection, that kind of fun stuff with birds. If you guys want to talk a bit maybe about some of your own undergrad experiences, maybe those that were some good experiences you had, maybe some bad experiences you had.
I could say that I feel pretty fortunate with my undergrad research experiences in that I got both wet lab genetics research experience as well as field experience through two different grants that I got in undergrad. And they're both good fits for what I wanted to do at the time, and sort of getting hands-on experience with stuff in the field really made me realize that I wanted to do that as part of my career, as well as getting some wet lab genetics experience really showed me sort of what you can do in a lab. And I got to work on a fairly independent project, which was exciting as an undergrad. I'd say as an undergrad too, I felt like it was pretty important to be thinking about the questions at hand. And I think that kind of helped too. And that I was going to my advisor being like, oh, I think a project like this could be kind of interesting. And while, I didn't have it quite right because I didn't know the literature that well, we could kind of get into a conversation of oh, that's actually wouldn't be feasible. That'd be like a PhD project, but this sort of thing would be really perfect, if you wanted to look at that. And getting to develop an independent project, which I think a lot of students who, maybe are freshmen and sophomores and are doing, joining labs for the first time, could have that opportunity down the line.
I also was really fortunate to have great mentors during my undergrad, and I was just in one lab during my whole undergrad career, and I think that was really valuable. And I think, obviously that's not possible for everyone because, sometimes your interests change, and that's fine. But, giving somewhat of a longer term commitment to a lab, I think can really help you be able to develop your skills and develop your relationship with your mentors a lot deeper than maybe some of the more shorter term experiences can be. And so I think there is a balance between, gaining lots of variety of skills and knowledge and everything, and kind of, getting that more deep relationship, and those opportunities like Jonathan was speaking about of develop your own independent project and things like that. So yeah, I think that was one of the things that I appreciated the most about my my undergraduate experience.
I do appreciate you guys talking about your undergrad experiences, because obviously they brought you here, right? So I think undergrads do like to hear about the experiences that grad students have had, that led them to where they are. I'll share mine, that I was fortunate to have a really diverse array of experiences where it's I definitely agree with you, Allie, that it's great to, build a really strong connection with one lab and perhaps get one or two publications. That can be really good for some people. But for me, I was a go-getter. I really wanted to have a bunch of different experiences under my belt. I started with humble fruit flies, right? Like I was pushing fruit flies for a while. And there I developed a really close relationship with my advisor because I went to a Cal State school. So that's like a primarily undergrad institution, So in some capacity, I enjoyed that I was able to have a strong connection with a faculty advisor. But in a way, I wish that I had a mentor who was a PhD student, because that was my goal. I knew that was my goal, since I was a sophomore, but I didn't have any PhD students like at my disposal. So I think that's why, I've come here and like, I want to be that mentor, right? Because I didn't have a PhD student mentor, who was a little closer to my career stage. And then it's actually interesting when I finally got a PhD mentor, when I did my REU in, 2019, it was not a good experience. It was just not a good match, not to get too into it, but it was just a bad mentorship experience. So I think the combination of that, of like not having a PhD student mentor to like having one and it was bad, just made me want to be that person as a grad student. That's been very important to me. And maybe some of you guys can relate to that on some level.
I think you bring up a great point to this because, when it works, it's great, but it just doesn't always work. My first summer experience in undergrad, I got an internship. It was great. I was very happy with it. I was lucky to get that opportunity. And the fall came around the next year and I changed my major and I said, nope, not doing that again. And that year I sent 42 emails cold calling professors in a couple adjacent departments, and 2 emailed me back. And it just, that's, in my undergrad experience, that was a common path. That was the journey. And so I'm excited to be here that Muser has this opportunity to maybe cold call graduate students and other mentors and not just professors, but changing the platform so that you can take the risk and have an experience and learn. Is this something that you're interested in doing or not? Sure, there's help that undergraduates can offer in research labs, and I think that that's a huge asset. But I also think that the majority of the value comes from the educational experience in looking for not just contributing to research, but what aspects of research do you enjoy? And is there a piece of research out there that you will want to continue on? And if not, that's okay too. These paths, as Ali said, they change, and that's part of the process, or at least it was for me.
One of the reasons I wanted to get into research was, one, it seemed like it looks good when you apply to med school to have research on your background. So kind of as a checklist, I did go into it pretty naively. And I joined about my sophomore year. And like Brad was saying, I emailed a bunch of people, got no responses. And then there was this one PI they said was very notorious. He expects a lot out of his undergrads, and they're like, be careful, my friends. But I went anyways because I was genuinely interested, in what research has. And so I tried it. And for the first 3 months, I was, doing experiments from all different projects. And it was a lot of fun learning how to run these gels. And I made a lot of dumb mistakes. I thought I was going to literally get kicked out of the lab. Like I ran my gel the opposite direction because I plugged black into red and red into black. Like there were just so many stupid mistakes, but I just enjoyed the art of being on the cutting edge. And I think people don't realize there's no cap when it comes to research, when it comes to the experiments you can do, the ideas you can have. You can be an undergrad, you can be a grad student, you can be a postdoc, but you're not limited to the ideas that you can contribute in these projects. Where in class, like there's only a set amount of knowledge you can ask. I mean, you can ask these questions to your professor, but you can't test them. And there's an intellectual freedom that comes with that. So I ended up just eventually after 3 months, my PI was impressed and he said, here's an independent project for you. And that was the start of it. And 3 years just flew by like that. And I had a blast. I loved it. I wanted to do MD, PhD. If I couldn't do med school, I wanted to do PhD. Like that's how much I loved research. And I think just to have that opportunity for some undergrads, just experience that, I think that would be the goal of Muser. And I think it's a great opportunity now.
A question that I think a lot of applicants probably have, and this is, going to get interesting, where if you're looking at a project, what are some things that stand out and are really good that make you more likely to choose a student? And what are some things that somebody could say to just, make you not want to select them at all.
What you write in your essay should match with what you have in your general bio. Like, it doesn't have to be a perfect match, because of course you're writing each essay to each thing. But if you write in your essay, I'm really interested, for example, if you're applying for me, in plants, but then your bio is about stuff that isn't related at all to like the interests that you write in your essay, that's kind of a red flag for me, right? I mean, maybe you are generally interested in it, but there should be something in your bio that I can at least link to. Say, okay, you're interested in a few different things, but one of the avenues you're looking for is to think about plants, for example.
I love reading the bio, because the essay they wrote for this job, sure, and I appreciate that, and I'm getting what I need to know. But with the bio, I'm not being spoon-fed what they want me to hear. I understand perhaps a little bit more perspective of where this applicant is coming from. And it doesn't, I've had most of my experiences not as red flags with the bio, but more of, okay, so working with this applicant might look like this, because they're approaching this, let's say, programming project from an app development side rather than a data analysis side, or something like that. And there's a lot of value, I think, in comparing that essay to the bio. And sometimes it can be a red flag, but most of the time I find it's quite helpful to contrast those.
One thing that I would say is that I think sometimes this is kind of more of a red flag. I think sometimes students try to add something really like creative or like very like attention grabbing in their essay, or it has in my experience. And I think sometimes that can work. But for example, I study lemurs, and I once got an essay that wrote the entire first paragraph about the movie Madagascar and King Julian and all of this. And it gave me a good chuckle, but I wasn't really compelled to like think that person would be a strong candidate, because maybe they wouldn't be taking it as seriously as some of the other people. So I think sometimes those things can work, but don't keep it professional. If you're going to like add a little bit extra or show a little bit more of your personality, I think that's great, but don't go overboard.
I think it's okay to also present a more well-rounded part of you in the bio as well, like saying some of the hobbies you're interested in, or something like that, because at the end of the day, you and I are going to be working together for long hours in the lab, and we're not going to always be talking about science. So I think that helps.
One thing that I notice a lot with undergrad applications is, they feel like they need to have all this experience already. But I mean, maybe this is just coming from like where I was as an undergrad, like, the experience isn't necessarily the most important part for all projects. Or with these essays, sometimes students will basically like grovel and just be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I've never done this, or this complex research topic that you study, I don't know about it. It's like, that's okay, like I don't think any mentor expects you to know about it, have an interest in it maybe and want to learn, I think, is how students should phrase things, that you're curious and you'd love to learn and hands-on, but don't feel like, you need to have like, I don't know, been in a neuroscience lab already and had all this experience. Like it's you're here to learn, right? That's just the advice that I always give, that just, you're not expected to have a PhD in this stuff already, obviously. Like no one is expecting you to be an expert and have years and years and years of experience.
Yeah, I would just say, don't sell yourself short. I mean, you made it to Duke as an undergrad. You're obviously talented, got some skills of your own. Just, present that side to you. And like Jonathan was saying, just be honest. And I think you'll find good results.
Yeah, and to add to that, exactly, I think some people who do have experience do sell themselves short on it, where they don't really agree. They're like, oh, I did some research in high school, doing this, but it's like, tell me more about that. Like, that's so cool that you had that opportunity. I, as a reader, want to hear more about what that opportunity was, why you chose that. Like, I don't know if they think it's just expected or like everybody does that, but I didn't do research in high school, so I don't know. I think applicants definitely shouldn't sell themselves short. And if they have a cool research experience, they should talk about it.
I also think what I really admire in a resume or something is long-term commitments, especially in high school. If you've done something for a long time, that should, whether it's just working a job or something you might consider insignificant. Like for me, if you've done that for 2 to 3 years and you stick through that, it shows some rigor, and I would take that very favorably.
This is sort of a question that I think a lot of students have, and I definitely had this question when I applied to Muser projects. I was actually pre-med my first semester. I'm a freshman and this is my second semester, but I was pre-med and I was looking for lab projects. I'm not pre-med anymore, but this is relevant because many of the projects that I was looking for, I remember applying to a lot of neuroscience-based labs, and the one thing that was really intimidating to me was seeing the lab description, like the project description, which, as you know, uses a lot of big biological terms, many of which I had to look up on Wikipedia. And what my essay sort of resembled was a very inexperienced freshman trying to figure out very complex biological topics and try and make it sound effortless. So I guess my question is, to what extent do you think students should address the research that the lab is doing? And are you always necessarily looking for a basic understanding of the research, or mostly just passion/experience?
That's a great question. I have been grueling over the same subject of my dissertation for over 5 years now. I don't feel that I know it, and so I don't expect anyone to join me to know it. If they did, great, thanks, I'm going to need that help. But if they don't, that's part of the process, right? And so for me, the biggest piece that I look for in applications is, as an applicant, what do you hope to gain from this experience? What do you want out of it? And that, what drives you, helps me understand what you're looking for and what helps interest you in the subject and what keeps you motivated and what makes you want to do more. Also helps me understand what I can do to help you achieve those goals and give you access to resources or pieces that you want to learn more about. I have to be honest, a lot of us, I think, who are writing these project descriptions are used to writing abstracts for papers or conferences, and we're just used to just regurgitating, whatever the content of our work in the same manner and description that we would to experts in our field who were too intimidated to talk to at conferences. And so once we can get past that, then there's an honest discussion about, sure, I've never done electroencephalography or however EEG is pronounced, but I think it's really cool and I would love to learn more about it. And I want to understand how signal processing is used to really make meaning out of these otherwise arbitrary signals coming from someone's scalp. And that type of application, to me, tells me a lot about what this applicant is really interested in and why they are looking at this project and not just browsing through what might look good on a med school application, for example.
If I can just add to that point too, I would just say it's also on the, this is more advice for the grad student or the person that's posting. Try not to use as much jargon, because the audience that you're trying to attract is undergrads. And so in any ways, you have to simplify your research. The more you can simplify it, the better I think it is for just presentations in general for you. So I took a extra effort to advertise my posts the best as I could. There were certain jargon that I would include, like CRISPR, because that's sexy and hot, and people are like, wow, when they hear that, that's got to be cool. But otherwise, I kept it to a minimum. I wouldn't include too many gene names and stuff. So I would say that point is more for the people posting. And then the second thing is, if you're the undergrad reading something like that, I think it also reflects a lot on the lab. Maybe, if they haven't put in the time to really think about how you would perceive it. Just don't take it personally is what I would say. Still try. I would keep how much of the science or the jargon you include in your essay to a minimum, just to the extent like EEG, like Brad said, just mention that, why you think it might be cool, why are you interested in it, and that would be good.
One of the reasons why this work is so important to me is the framework of, access and transparency that it provides, because even currently, it's still, we are still trying to get Muser out there, and the prevailing culture is who you know. So I'm just curious if you can tell, the undergrads, hopefully some of the grads already have an handle on this. How can you put yourself out there? What navigational skills, what resources would help you connect with opportunities for research?
I think what probably comes as, oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
No, go for it.
What probably comes as a shock to no one is it's a lot easier once you have your foot in the door. So the easy piece of advice I have is once you have a foot in the door, a connection somehow involved in research, ask that person if they know anyone in a field that you're interested in or other places. Because, I mean, that's an easy untapped connection that will carry you far. But that's once you're there, it's easy. But to get there is the hard part. And so to first get your foot in the door, you kind of have to go, in my experience, you have to do everything you can to find just a way into a lab just to get that first piece of experience. And so, I mean, I don't want to say accosting, but maybe cornering professors after class, maybe when we're in a less remote virtual world, but finding a way to ask anyone who does research about what they're doing and get them talking about it. Graduate students in particular, in my experience, love to talk about their research, for better or for worse. And so if you can get someone talking about their research and express interest, then it's easier to continue and say, oh, well, tell me more about that. Or, what areas are open in your lab? Or how did you get involved in research? Or do you know anyone who's looking to hire an undergraduate for a project? Or it's the biggest challenge is getting your foot in the door. And so take any means you can to try to find connections. And after that, hopefully it gets easier.
Yeah, at Duke, I think that in my experience and from what I've heard from my peers is that TAs can actually serve like in a role of kind of connecting students with research in some ways, because they often teach like discussion sections or something where you're having a little bit more personal contact. And so students might be more willing to kind of share with them their interests or something. And also if TAs a lot of times are graduate students, and so they know other graduate students who have projects going on, they know what else is going on in their department, and so they can know in the back of their mind like, oh, so-and-so is doing this project about this. And then if an undergraduate, approaches them and says like, oh, I'm interested in research, do you know anything? They can say, oh yeah, this person in the department is doing this person is doing this. And I think a way to kind of like prompt that is just for TAs, like during discussion sections or whatever, interactions you have, just to be like, I did research as an undergraduate and it was a really great experience for me, XYZ, just devote a couple of minutes to it, just to mention it. And then say like, if you're interested, if you want to learn more about this, if you want to know about opportunities, like let me know and I can, try to connect you in a way. And I think, obviously there's going to be times when that's going to work and better or worse, but I think it can be a good starting place, and also just a way for them, even if they don't know a direct project that the student could join, they could just say, oh, this is what I did when I was an undergraduate, just kind of introducing them to that process more. And also TAs, grad students at times are probably going to be more responsive than actual faculty members.
And I was just going to say one thing about the foot in the door example. I think it's fantastic where, especially for applicants who are looking at Muser, where maybe they're applying to a bunch of different projects and maybe just based on their experience level, maybe they didn't get their dream project, but they got one that's good too. I would suggest that they just go for it and get their foot in the door there with that experience, especially with, like I mentioned before, my first research experience was in a fruit fly lab and it was a great experience, but I learned very quickly, like, okay, I don't want to work with fruit flies ever again. But, from there, I was able to apply to internships, get into other labs, right? And kind of figure out where I fit in and what I like to do. So, I don't want any undergrad to think that, the first research experience they have, or really any experience they have, is indicative of like, this is the rest of my life now, because sometimes it's easy to feel that way when you're pushing fruit flies for like 3 hours, right? Like that you're like, well, this is the rest of my life. But, it's not that way at all. It's just an experience to get you where you want to go, wherever that may be.
Maybe this can just be a quicker question. So in high school, I had the experience to work in a couple of labs, and they were both very drastically different. And because Duke is an educational and research institution, and Muser sort of works to uphold that equity in research, but also education in research, my question is, how do you maintain that balance of education in your labs, but also giving students the independent work aspect? And essentially for students starting out in research for the first time.
Yeah, I think the two extremes that you brought up there, I think you try to strike a balance between both of those. That's probably the best answer. And you do this really, I think, by focusing on the interests of the mentee and the interests of the mentor. And it's like this Venn diagram, and the intersection is what you're trying to shoot for. So some of the questions I always ask when I'm interviewing some of these candidates, it's like, how do you learn best? Or, what's your mentorship style? Or what's that? And then each of them will have their own unique responses. And I think I kind of say, okay, well, I know I can teach someone like that. So someone said they asked too many questions, and I was like, that's perfect. I'd rather someone ask me too many questions than no questions at all. But then some people are very quiet and reserved, and they want to do all these independent experiments on their own, and they have difficulty asking questions. So then I know for that mentee, I say, okay, I need to check on them just to be hey, do you have any questions at this stage? So I think it's a really tailored response, and it's kind of on the responsibility of both the mentor to realize these different individual needs, and then also on the mentees to express those needs. I think that's how you tackle this problem.
Yeah, in some ways, it's an existential question of mentorship, right? I think all of us as grad students, we have mentors in our PIs, and I think any grad student can tell you that every single PI mentors differently and has a different combination of being hands-on or hands-off. And I think part of it is going to be based on personality. I think what Jude said is really apt about checking in with students and figuring out how much mentorship they really need and what's going to work best for them, someone who's more hands-on or hands-off. And then something similar when I'm looking for a student with a project, I'll tell them, hey, this project will be very hands-on. I will be here the entire time. If you have any questions, ask me and I'll walk you through everything. Or I might go, this project is going to be much more hands-off. I'll check in once a week or something, but I'm kind of expecting that you'll be sort of running this. And if you have questions, you'll reach out to me with questions, right? And I think being upfront with students when you're looking for this research too is helpful.
That's something that in my experience, I like to see that information up front, because I'm not looking for people who have done all of this before, because I'm particular enough to say the way you learn to do it is not the way I want you to do it. We're going to retrain anyway. What I really look for is again, like I said earlier, what you're looking to gain from the experience. And if this is your first research or wet lab experience, great, mention that, because as we were talking about earlier, I think perhaps before you joined, getting your first experience, your first foot in the door, if you will, into research is one of the hardest parts of exploring research. And I don't think I can speak for many others, but that is an attribute that as a mentor, I want to help and I want to facilitate. And so if you come in and say, I'm interested in biology and I've taken these classes, but I've not had this experience in research yet, I'm looking for that. That is one of the things that I want most. I mean, that makes it very clear to me as a mentor that you're passionate about it, that you're interested in it, and that you are someone who's willing to learn these experiences.
I'm going to add to that is that sometimes, and this might be if you end up getting an interview rather than on the application itself, but sometimes we're looking for also translatable skills. So, for example, one of the most competitive candidates I had this year worked in a hospital, worked as an EMT, right? And I'm a field biologist, right? But why is that a good skill? Because I know that they can work long shifts, they can be on their feet, and then they know health and safety. All those skills are really translatable to working in a field, right? So, sometimes it might be that you have really different experiences, and it might work on the application, might be later on, in the process, but that helps sometimes to kind of get to know you as a person and why, as Jude had mentioned earlier on, talking about how your hobbies or how your interests or other previous life experiences you've had might fit into a given lab.